Serious, Redditors who've found a secret passage, tunnel, or room, what's your story? I found a room in the back of a closet at my parents' house when I was a kid. It was essentially a kid-sized hole cut in drywall that led to a small room under the stairs leading to the basement. None of us had known it was there. The room was all concrete, with some 2x4s stretching across the ceiling and others acting as supporting beams for the stairs, I'm assuming. Totally empty, but it was covered in graffiti from the previous owners. And that's how I learned about curse words. I was going to spend the night with a friend whose mother was a real estate agent. Before we went to his place we had to go to this old Victorian house his mother was going to show the next day, and she wanted to do a few things while there. My friend and I went exploring and found a secret servants' hallway that was tucked behind the interior walls. There was only one door that led to the attic area where the servants' quarters were at. I remember seeing where a bell assortment hung that went to each room of the house. It was long gone, but the stained glass was still there. I love that secret room and plan on making one if I ever build a house. I work in real estate and was visiting a large block of land that a developer was going to develop 40 townhomes on. We're walking around chatting about what will go where etc. And I ask him if he's demolishing the house on the front corner of the lot. He then got super excited and took us up to visit it. We walk in. First thing we see is shaggy yellow carpet not only in every room of the house, but also on the walls and the ceiling. We walk around the kitchen, with a bar and pool table in the center of it, and then see an old 1960s looking fridge in the dining room. Didn't think anything of it, considering how weird the place was already. But the developer opened the fridge door and it was a secret staircase going down to an underground basement. The basement had the craziest sound system and disco balls and a moth-earthed stage. There was a large canvas painting down there too, and the developer took it off the wall, and there was an escape tunnel out to the back of the block. Apparently the past owner was a super successful lawyer back in the 1970s who took on a lot of drug cases. Pictures of the Hales mansion. I used to rent the garage apartment behind this massive 20,000 square foot house that had formerly been an archdiocese. Place looked like a museum. Tornado season came around and there was a massive storm, so I had to take shelter in the basement beneath the garage. In the basement there's some old paintings boarded up like they came from the warehouse in Indiana Jones. And all this massive machinery, since I guess plumbing and electric for such a large structure is a little different than your average one bedroom. I don't have service and there's not a lot to do down there, so I explore and find this square red metal hatch set about waist high in a concrete wall. Open it up and there's a tunnel with pipes and lights running down the whole length. I couldn't explore it then because I didn't have lights or anything, but I came back later with a flashlight and crawled my way down, eventually reaching a spot where it dropped down to a level where I had to crawl to the end of the tunnel where I slipped out. Looked around and saw a bunch of Christmas decorations and random junk and realized the tunnel led from the garage to the main house and I was now in their basement. Quickly went back the way I came, since I'm sure the rich folks wouldn't be pleased to find their random Mexican tenant exploring their home. Edit. Added pictures. The landing on the staircase going upstairs was hinged. If you opened it you could drop into the area below the staircase. From there you could open a door in the wall which leads down into the basement. In theory you could act as if you were going upstairs from the main floor and go through the above. Get into the basement and escape the house from the basement door. Edit. A little more info. This house is in upstate NY and dated back easily into the 1920s or earlier 1895. Possibly we thought it was some underground railroad stuff or possibly prohibition related. We did find old bottles of liquor in the walls when we remodeled and it fit the timeline better than the slavery did. There was a teeny Coraline-like door in my bedroom closet that was hidden when the regular door was opened and against the wall. It led to a finished attic room that I'd hide in to scare my parents. I didn't mention the room's existence until we had lived there for a couple years and then they stole it for storage space. Not really a secret, but we have a hidden room in our house. If you open the closet door in my office, there is another door on the back wall that leads to a room. It was going to be our spy headquarters, but now it just holds boxes. My freshman year at my university I got stupid drunk, 2013, and decided to go into this cafeteria that had been closed for a year at that point. It had just a thin metal gate preventing anyone from entering. Well, I pulled on it a little and it snapped, allowing entrance. It was cool being in this cafeteria that nobody had been in it. But it got better. I found how to get into the basement. This basement led to a corridor that I later found out is 1.5 miles of underground tunnels. I did some exploring, but a lot of it was flooded and just smelt of decay and rot. Found some Coke bottles from the 1950s. After I did some research on the history, I found out I stumbled into the condemned tunnels of the university that was used to transport things between buildings. A hurricane had rolled through in the 80s and flooded a large portion of the tunnels and damaged it. The university decided it was easier to just not use them than to repair them. Pretty cool thinking. I was probably one of the only people to step foot in there within the past 30ish years. After a decade of working for a poorly managed embroidery company, my mother offered to buy out the owners and take over. They said no. So she quit and opened up her own shop in a smallish mall in our town. The building was pretty old. Over the years had seen businesses and owners come and go. Each store had a small door at the back that had access to a service corridor. It didn't get much use since it only really gave access to the plumbing and electrical. But those of us kids whose parents owned and operated shops would play in it frequently. We thought we were pretty clever, being able to randomly appear at different parts of the mall like magic. One day, we came across a panel that looked like it didn't quite fit right. We pushed on it and found a small room that had apparently been used as storage, but had been sealed off for no reason. We showed our parents and the landlord. The landlord was cool enough to have it cleaned up, put a sofa, a small refrigerator and a TV in it. It became the de facto kid hangout for those of us in the mall. Eventually my mother moved to another office location, but it was fun for a bit. I have a beach house in Rhode Island. There is an old World War II bunker right next to the beach and all the main entrances are blocked off. There is also a decoy house a few hundred yards away. It was meant to look like an old weathered house but was more like 2 pillboxes stacked up. Inside the decoy house's basement there was a hole with a later going down it into tunnels that lead to the bunker. There are also many more tunnels that go for miles all over the coast to other bunkers and such, or just come out in random places, although most of them are locked. Me and my friends found them a few years back and we still use them as hangout spots every summer. It's a great time. The bunker is huge, probably around 8-10,000 square feet all under a giant hill, and it has many blocked off tunnels and paths inside. To this day it's one of the darkest, coolest places I have ever been. I went to a high school that was built years ago, maybe like 2-300 years ago. Me and my friend noticed these hatches that were about 6 feet off the floor next to all the toilets. For context, the school was based around a quad, so there was a toilet down some stairs at each corner of the quad. Obviously we had to check these hatches out, so we did during a drama lesson that we snuck out of. We got in there and there was a corridor under the actual corridor which was only about 4-5 ft tall, so we had to crawl through. The corridors connected all the toilets in their vents at the top of the walls that were at skirting board level in the classrooms, so we could watch lessons going on, which was cool. There were tons of pipes and electrical wires and other non-interesting is that you would expect. Apart from in one corner of the quad, the hatch for this one was locked from the inside. It looked and the pipes had all gone back into the wall or stopped, so all the walls were bare concrete slabs rather than bricks, which was odd. There was a small gap at the bottom of the wall that I could only just fit through. It was a struggle crawling under as we only had our mobiles for torches, and I am not the smallest of people. When we got through it felt so much colder in this opening than it did in the corridor. The space was also much more spacious as we could stand up, and also the lights from our torches didn't light up the opposite side of the room when we shone them, which almost made it seem like our torches weren't even on. The room also smelt really bad, and we saw there was what looked like a decomposed cat, which was now mostly just bone and some fur at the side next to the wall closest to us. More freakily, there was this weird stone arch above the cat. There was some red writing that wasn't blood but was pretty creepy. It was a few years ago, but I vaguely remember it saying something along the lines of, "If you are found here the school will expel you, but Lucifer shall does much worse." There was a few scratches on the wall and some symbols that we thought were letters but couldn't make them out. We took some pictures and got the duck out of there really quickly, because we were eating bricks at this point. It was a fairly prestigious school, so expulsions was probably the scariest thing that could happen to us at that point. Ha 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 ha. This was about 4 years ago and the pics were on an old phone, so don't really think I could get them, although I would like to see them myself now. Edit. Found these on an old FB Messenger group chat. Trawling through old embarrassing photos of me and my mates was quite fun. These are the pics my friend took of the gap we had to crawl through. The wall with the symbols. The pics of the dead cat and satanic threats was on my old phone, and guess I never sent them on the group chat. When I was in high school, my dad purchased this old Victorian that he intended to flip. Before he got around to working on it, he'd let me hang out there with friends. It seemed pretty cool until the first, and only, night we decided to spend the night. We set up an old TV, DVD player, and basically made the whole empty living room a big lounge sleeping area with beanbags and blankets. It was getting pretty late when we started to hear noises coming from upstairs. It sounded like scratching and rustling. Nothing too freaky, probably mice or something. Well, anyways, one of the guys that was over decided we should go investigate. We head up the stairs and used our phones for light as none of the fixtures upstairs had light bulbs. We're walking through the hall, getting closer and closer to the noise. We get to the huge built-in bookshelf at the end of the hall and the noise somehow seems to be coming from behind it. My friend starts knocking on the wall around it to see if it stirs up any more noise. We're still assuming some kind of animal or something. He starts monkeying with the shelf and he manages to pull the entire thing towards us, and it ends up being a freaking door to a hidden room. Of course we were giddy, cause this is something you only read about or see in movies. We shine our phones into the room and it's straight out of a horror film. Filth everywhere, super old looking kids toys, spider webs up the yin yang, and the creepiest part of all, super deep scratches on the back of the bookshelf from fingernails. You could even see the dirty handprints that went along with them. It was the thing of nightmares and we got the hell out of there quick. Definitely one of the scariest things I've ever seen. We found a secret room in my aunt's house, behind the kitchen cabinets when they were being swapped out. It was this walled off area between the unexpectedly wide chimney and the outside wall. Big enough for maybe 3 adults to stand in somewhat uncomfortably. The weirdest part is that it was all painted red. Floor, ceiling, walls, everything. Right. So when I lived in South Carolina, we had this house that had dormer windows. I was young. Didn't own the home. I was a preteen. I didn't know the ins and outs of the house, but it was always a mystery as to how to get to the windows. I had an upstairs room, and where the window access should have been was walled in. Or so I thought. Turns out there was a hidden hinge door, a push-away wall panel. I found this by leaning against it and falling through. The passageway led to the dormer window, storage area, with a chest I never opened, and cut across the whole upstairs to the other bedroom which had the same thing. Well, go and make yourself a cough because this is a large story. I live in Ciudad Vita, a lovely town constructed during Perón's presidency in Argentina nearly 60-50 years ago. The town purpose was to give home to all the army soldiers and police officers who were looking for a place to build a family. It's located in the west of Buenos Aires metropolitan area. Because of its purpose, the town is also kind of a stronghold with barracks in one side, some Weta towers with sniper-like positions, and forest on the other side. So one day while doing my bed and tidying my room, I fell and there was a metallic sound in the ground, specifically in the wooden floor of the wardrobe. I called my parents and with the help of my father we discovered there was a tunnel behind our house that has exits all around my neighborhood. Sadly the police make us cover it with cement so it's closed until something happens. TLDR, there's tunnels, barracks and water towers with sniper places all around my city. There's a trapdoor behind my wardrobe and the tunnels go around all my neighborhood. The police close it with cement. TT. I'm not a native English speaker so forgive my orthography sins. When I was in grade school, my friend and I had to come in one Saturday to do some cleaning as a punishment for something we did. They had us go to the church, which was associated with the school, and help them there. The priest led us to a room full of boxes and told us to help organize things. I guess it was all stuff people donated and we were tasked with separating books from clothing, etc. Anyway, there had always been this rumor that there was a secret bowling alley in the basement of the church, and my friend and I were definitely going to take this opportunity to find out. After watching us for about 10 minutes, The priest leaves us alone and said he'll come back later to check up on us. We waited a few minutes and then decided to try and find the basement. This church was huge, so it wasn't easy, but it was fun. Felt like being in some heist movie. After about 20 minutes or so, we finally found it. We walked into this giant room with tables and chairs stacked everywhere. The only light we had was the itty flash from my friend's flip phone. We eventually found a light and realized where we were. We found the bowling alley. It was only a couple of lanes and looked in pretty bad shape. It probably hadn't been used for decades and now they just used the space to store tables and chairs. It was cool to discover that the rumor was true, but at the same time it was disappointing. I looked it up years later and I guess the church closed because of deterioration in 1988 and was reopened in 1992. I guess they didn't feel it was worth fixing up the bowling alley, so now it's just a giant storage room. My old high school was built in the 1800s. It is a very beautiful building that is 4 stories tall. There are lots of stairs throughout the building and near one corner of the building are stairs that no one ever uses, very far from all classrooms. During my senior year my buddy and I were wasting time just wandering the hallways and we got to these seldom used stairs. We were on the bottom floor and noticed there were stairs leading down to another level below. We followed those stairs and noticed they lead to a door which was cracked open. We went inside the door and it led to a large room filled with cubicles and dozens of employees on computers. The weird thing was, none of these employees were school staff. We were seniors. We'd seen everyone for 4 years. We were confused and we left. We tried to return a few times later but the door leading to the room was always locked. This was in 2006, and I still wonder who the hell all those people were. My husband and I bought a 100-plus-year-old farmhouse. It needed to be refurbished. It was the biggest undertaking that I've ever done. We peeled up the carpet to find asbestos tile. Joy. Then we peeled up the tile to find laminate. Woot. Then we peeled up the laminate to find wood floors. Holy it. And not just a wood floor. A ducking trapdoor in the kitchen. I thought that was super freaking cool. It was extremely water damaged having been right next to the kitchen sink. But we pried that sucker open to find a coal room. There's still coal down there. A few tons of it. I don't know why that hatch was there. There's no stairway leading down but we found a tiny door in the basement behind a cabinet and it also led to the coal room. I assume back in the day they burnt coal. Eventually we plan to make it into cold storage with a stairway and I'll just be able to walk down from the hatch I rebuilt all by myself. I worked as an intern for the architecture and engineering department at uni and was assigned to work on a survey to make sure that the blueprints were accurate for every building. I get through maybe 80% of the work and then I have to go to the Army ROTC HQ on campus to do the survey. No big deal. Everything in the office was correctly represented on the blueprints. But the guy working the desk told me that there was a hallway behind the office. So he takes me back there and opens the door to a hallway full of dust, cobwebs and high windows on the right that disappear a few feet, and as the building is built on a hill, dutifully, I go forward into the darkness. I can't remember if I didn't have a flashlight or what, but I went in there and all I could think was that I was going to find a body or something. So I just said that the blueprints were right and got the duck out of there. Definitely something you'd see in a horror movie. I moved into a house with my friend. Was an old Victorian house complete with a basement. I'm in the UK. Went down to put some furniture there and checked it out. 2 carpeted rooms with old junk in it and then some bricks on the floor from the wall. Look at the wall and there's a hole in there. Just big enough for me to fit through at a squeeze. Dirt sloped down into a huge high ceiling room, complete with a shelf with a sleeping bag and duvet on. The room had been soundproofed. Had electricity and water in it, with a huge closed off fireplace, floor to ceiling, in it. Only way in and out of the room was the hole I crawled through. Didn't freak me out too much. Figured I was underneath next door's house, but the duvet bothered me. Lived there for a year with no problems though. One of the tractor drivers in the farm whilst plowing fell into a hole. Suddenly appeared beneath one of the tires. Turned out it was a series of tunnels dug by a Canadian tunneling company, as in army unit, practicing here in England for the invasion of Germany. A whole network of tunnels hidden beneath us, all kept secret. About 18 months ago my dad purchased a house that was a church in a past life. At some point the church closed and the pastor continued living there for several years as he remodeled the church into a house, which eventually bankrupted him and ended with the home going into foreclosure. Almost every room in the house on the main floor has an exterior door, and there are a couple different staircases that lead to the basement. Several months after purchasing the house, while going up the stairs from the basement into the attached garage, my dad noticed a weird carpeted shelf off to the side of the stairs. Looking more closely he realized there was a handle, which when lifted up revealed a hidden door that goes to another small staircase down. Once down the hidden stairs he realized there was a hidden 8-foot by 10-foot secret room with all concrete brick walls. The room is nearly soundproof and you really wouldn't notice it unless you were looking very closely. He jokes that he is going to use it as a storage space for all of his food, water, and weapons for the apocalypse. Makes me wonder what the church used the room for though. I clean nice houses for a living and one day was in the home of a priest. He was moving out due to retirement, so his house was empty. I was just there to vacuum all the rugs. Anyway, I'm in his bedroom vacuuming and I open his closet door to get the rug, and there, since all of his clothing was gone, I noticed a small door, probably 3 feet x 3 ft, on the back wall of his closet. It had a lock on the outside, so needless to say I immediately tried to unlock it. It was a slide lock, so it took me a minute to undo it. Finally I did, and I inched the door open a bit. I look around the corner to see what is behind this door. It was some sort of insulated tunnel which led downward, just very large blackness with a bit of weird pink melted insulation stuff around the corners. I shut the door and locked it after only a few seconds because I thought it was super weird. The retired priest has since been replaced, so I continue to clean this home bi-weekly. I'll have to look at it again and get a photo. I used to live in downtown Greenville, TX, in the 1990s. Greenville used to be a thriving cotton town in the 1950s, but the population has declined and downtown is mostly abandoned. My friends and I used to explore the abandoned buildings for fun before urban exploring became a thing. Anyway, there was a multi-story building that used to have a Mexican restaurant downstairs in the 1970s, but it had been abandoned since then. The bottom of that building was locked up tight, but we were able to gain access to the roof from a neighboring building, and finally got inside that building that way. Inside were some old offices, nothing much of interest there, but then I noticed a crack in the wall behind some peeling wallpaper. There was a door-sized sliding panel that had been papered over decades before. Behind it was an apartment that would have been used as housing by the people who owned the business downstairs, and it was largely untouched. I found newspapers from the 1940s and the last one was dated 1947. I went to a military school in New Mexico that had been around for a really long time. The place looks like an old fort. Anyway, senior year we are messing around in the Sally Port, wrestling, shoving, whatever, just being idiots. One of us slams into a green door and it popped open. In the 4 years I had been there, I had never really thought about those doors, nor had I seen anyone use them. The door opened to a spiral metal staircase that went down into the darkness. Cobwebs abound. Long story short, it was a creepy, musty, old storage area. I don't remember if the catacombs went the whole perimeter of the barracks or what, but I know we explored pretty fully, found some old furniture, some clothing, bedding, and some other dated items. Most likely just things various cadets had left behind in their room. I think I took an expired fire extinguisher that was in some forgotten corner of the area. TL. Doctor found an old maintenance tunnel and took a fire extinguisher that would likely only make the situation worse. I used to work at Subway. Yes, I was a sandwich artist in Newcastle, UK. Anyway, the shop was just up from Castle Keep. Downstairs next to the freezers was this open hole of rubble, so dark you couldn't see into it very far. I was too scared to go down and didn't have a torch, but apparently it is connected to a series of tunnels underneath the city. Secret passage here to an underground storm bunker. Dallas can get some intense storms, so I had one installed. Keeps enough provisions for 4 people for 7 days. I used to rent a house that had a fake electrical panel in the basement. Behind the panel was steel door that led to a panic room of sorts, built into a hill. The room also had a toilet and shower, along with a shop sink. There were fans that blew fresh air into the room from pipes leading outside. There was a huge 3D topographic map of the surrounding area on one wall. All of the electrical for the room was powered directly from the solar panels on the roof. The panic room had a secret panel of its own in one wall that led to a tunnel, culvert, lined with ribbon lights. The tunnel led to a false floor in the garage, so you could make your escape. The guy who built the house was a Y2K nut. Did construction work and was often sent out of town for jobs. The company would cover the hotel and food. In Northern California, perhaps San Leandro, there was a hotel right off the freeway. The closet had a staircase that would lead you up onto an attic to where you could see in the people's rooms. Shady as duck. I did not go up there. A coworker did. My parents' house had two. Well, sort of. There was an old basement that was structurally unsound, and so my brother and I were forbidden from going down there. I only saw it once. It was dark and damp. Sorry, that's all I remember. I was very young. When I was 6, my parents had it filled in and repaired, so all that remained was the cupboard under the stairs and a concrete slab. The upstairs attic was also our playroom. And a really cool playroom because it was the size of nearly the entire house, so a huge area. There were holes in the walls you could crawl through and end up in the void between our house and the neighbor's house. Nothing there but cobwebs and dust. After we moved out, the new owners converted it into a master bedroom. It doesn't really count. But in the garden was an old disused well that had been covered with a metal cover. You could pry it open and peer down inside. Of course we weren't supposed to, but we did all the same and somehow never became the next baby Jessica. They had that one secured and filed in properly shortly before we moved. My great uncle lived in a pretty larger house that had been connected in hiding fleeing slaves. He said he had looked around a lot but could never find anything. Basically, one day my mom and I had gone over and we were helping with a renovation and tearing up some walls, and we found a pretty large hole in the wall leading to a cement wall which was in the basement. There used to be a room in the basement right where that wall was when my mom's cousins had inherited the house. Could totally have housed runaways. Edit, just my great uncle. So, capital I, as an easy way to make side money to fuel my Warhammer hobby. Flip furniture, items, and etc. on swap shops. The above is relevant because due to the prominence of shabby chicken nostalgia, older furniture is super popular and easy to flip. Cool thing about old school furniture is that sometimes they have secret or hidden compartments, which I always try to find. I have found a few so far, and the most interesting one was a small compartment inside of a secretary with series of black and white photographs, dated from the 40s to as late as 57, of random places around town and people, who were mostly African American. I tried to locate the original owner or descendants to return the photographs, but the trail went cold after the second owner back had gotten the secretary from a pawn shop in the 80s and the former owner of the pawn shop didn't remember who had sold it to him. Long story short, I donated the photographs to a local museum. They'd display them as the sights of my town. It was really cool looking at evidence of how things had changed over the years. The old cars and fashion. It was quite interesting. I went down into the construction site under my religious college and went through the tunnels marked with radiation shelter signs. Then I came up into an actual abandoned chapel with an altar. The whole way to the cafeteria went right by it, but there was no way to get in anymore. My friend worked in Mary King's Close in Edinburgh, which is a place that does guided tours of the underground city. When the population of Edinburgh began to grow hundreds of years ago, they built on top of the old city, and this old city is now miles and miles of tunnels and buildings right underneath the Edinburgh we know today. Anyway, most of the old city has been blocked off for safety reasons, but Mary King's Close has a couple of streets you can wander down into to get a feel for life back in the 1600s. For a while the close have been trying to unblock bricked off streets so they have a larger area of the old city for people to explore, but with not much luck. Possible cave-ins and dead ends. Also probably unsafe areas. I'm not entirely sure. That is until my friend told me that they discovered what they originally thought was just an old boarded up wall at the back of one of the caverns, which actually turned out to be some sort of massive wooden door. I recall her saying they found the remnants of hinges on one side and a small keyhole on the other. This was a few years ago that my friend was telling me all this, so I'm not sure if they have managed to do anything about it yet. I hope they have. This sort of thing seems so cool to me. There must be so many streets that haven't been wandered in hundreds or years, and I want to know what cool things are down there. Edit. Word. In the middle of Copenhagen in Denmark there is a village hidden in plain sight called the Yellow Village. There are two ways to get there. One is through a tunnel under the train tracks. The village was owned by the railroad but has now been sold. This is the pictures from the process of selling. From a similar thread. More than there was something like that in the woods by my apartment building when I was little. No mysterious logo. But the door was stuck in the ground. As though it was supposed to lead to a bomb shelter or an old cellar or something. Actually, I bet that's what it was. A cellar to some old house long since gone for whatever reason. It just had that antique sort of look to it. More than anyway, a friend and I spent the afternoon trying to open it. Considering there was no visible lock. No luck. Somehow we concluded that the door belonged to leprechauns. So naturally only leprechauns must have been able to open it. My friend gave up after that. Capital I, on the other hand, spent a good year sneaking off to try and spot a leprechaun so that I could ask it to open the door for me. Then my family moved to a house, leaving me severely disappointed that I could never catch an Irish folk creature in the middle of the Minnesota woods. TLDR. I found a random old cellar in the woods when I was little. Technically none of these things because I could never actually open the door. But I was convinced it somehow led to Leprechaun Land. When me and my brother were kids we found a floor hatch in his room. It was hidden under the linoleum and really tightly shut. But we managed to get it open. Underneath was a flight of stairs leading to a single room with cement walls and nothing in it except a bed frame and a small table. The realtor who sold our family the house had no idea it existed. And neither had the people who lived there before us. Or anyone else we asked. Still don't know why it was hidden or what it was for. The house is from the 1930s. My child brain at the time assumed it was where the garden gnomes lived. My manager found a secret room in his basement. Apparently there was a little window into this room covered by a large painting when they purchased the house. Inside of the room were random objects such as a refrigerator, a sled, a filing cabinet, and just a bunch of things. There was no door to this room and the window was too small to fit any of the stuff through it, which means the person who put the stuff in there built the walls around it. We are all convinced he needs to dig up the floor since it's gravel and broken concrete unlike the tile in the rest of the basement. There's definitely a body in there.